Well, joining me now from London is Xala. He's the chairman of South African Business Abroad. In Johannesburg, we have Ferial Haffajee. She's the associate editor of South Africa's daily Maverick. And completing our panel is political analyst Oliver Dickson. He's also a presenter at YFM, a youth radio station in Johannesburg. Thanks all of you for joining us. Ferial, let me begin with you. Nhlanhla Nene, was his resignation necessary?
Well, Imran, I believe that his resignation was necessary because he was found to have lied about how many times he met the family at the center of our state capture or state corruption story. I think that we also need to bear in mind that he was extremely brave and he saved his country a lot of money by refusing a nuclear deal that we really didn't want. So I think that history will look fondly upon him.
Oliver Dickson, was this about the lying or was it about actually meeting with the Guptas at all in Saxon World?
It was about more than just that. It was certainly about meeting them, but I mean, meeting the Guptas alone is not a transgression. I think the content of what had transpired in those meetings is perhaps what he would like to avoid coming into the public domain, and this is why he, for instance, would have stepped down. The EFF claims they have very damning information on him, not just relating to the Guptas, but particularly related to his tenure at the PIC, the Public Investment Corporation, where his son financially benefited while he was the chairperson of the PIC. So that too was a good enough reason for him to resign. There's a clear conflict of interest there, and I think it should have been a case where he discloses information to the public much sooner.
Right. Let me go to Xolani in London. Xolani, there's a bunch of people saying that, well, if everybody who met up with the Guptas resigned, there'd be nobody left in South African politics, right? I mean, I'm not a politician. I met up with the Guptas. They offered me a job as a journalist for their TV station. Everybody met up with them, right? So when we look at beyond that, what is it? Is there something paddling underneath the surface here that we're unaware of, or are you aware of something, Xolani?
No, look, first and foremost, you must remember that it's just only 8 months that the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is the president of South Africa. You must remember that international investors were unable to invest and have confidence to invest in South Africa. You are sitting with a president who wants now to raise more than 100 billion, asking international investors to invest. I think what the president have done is not only about Nhlanhla Nene, but is to build confidence for investors to invest in South Africa and boost the economy.
Okay, so building confidence. Ferial, is that true? That if we look at someone like Nene and his alleged transgressions, they seem to be mild, yet he's falling on his sword, which suggests that this is really rooting out corruption. This is an example of really cleaning up the mess. Is that true?
I know we don't have time now, but I'd love to hear more about that job offer you got. I think what this moment does represent for us, Imran, is the setting of a bar at a far higher level than we used to in South Africa, where before somebody would stay on in office even after committing horrible instances of corruption and being caught quite red-handed. Our former president was a case in point. We now have, I think, Minister Nene, former Minister Nene, setting a gold standard where if you mess up, you go. It's an ethical as opposed to a technically legal standard, and I think it means good things for our country going forward. The new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is very much crafting an identity as an anti-corruption campaigner. And for me, this has been a good week. Everybody was worried what the markets would do after we've had about 5 finance ministers in the past 3 or so years. And in fact, they've responded very well to the new finance minister, Tito Mboweni, coming in.
Okay, I'll tell you on Twitter DM about what they said to me in my meeting with them. But let me go to Oliver Dickson.
I'd love to know.
Oliver Dickson, is this zero tolerance in action? Are we seeing zero? This is what zero tolerance looks like.
No, I think we're still far from having zero tolerance as when it comes to corruption in South Africa. I think a number of people who are seemingly corrupt are still holding very powerful positions that the president knows about. So I don't think we should hail the president as a corruption buster just yet until he acts on a number of other ministers. But importantly, I'm very wary that we should be hailing Nhlanhla Nene as a hero of the country. I think a number of things here. One, he stepped down for good reason. That's not an extraordinary thing. That's just the necessary thing to do, the normal thing to do. So hailing him as some sort of hero that puts the country first certainly can't be true if it is in fact the case that he needed to step down. He only needed to step down insofar as he believed he had committed wrong actions. And if he had committed wrong actions, then this is clearly a minister that shouldn't be holding this position.
So Ferial, you say it's the gold standard, and Oliver says this was just merely the normal thing to do.
That's what I love about our millennial generation of editors and journalists. They hold very clear views. I suppose it's because I've seen so many ministers hanging on in office forever, facing the worst kinds of charges, that this for me does seem to have set a standard. Also, Imran, I was at our big commission of inquiry into corruption last Wednesday and listened for many hours to the evidence of the former Minister Nhlanhla Nene, and really he took many punches for saying no to that nuclear deal. I think when push comes to shove, he did the right thing. There's also no evidence that his son benefited from that oil deal because of his personal interference. It looks like it was somebody else's.
And Xolani, as a patriotic South African and an ANC man representing South Africa abroad, has this hurt the president? The president came in, he said he's anti-corruption, he's going to clean up the mess of what came before under President Zuma. He reappoints someone like Nene, and not long after, Nene resigns. In, I guess, the long and the short of it, is this hurting the president?
Look, the president, I think, don't put it as, is this hurting the president? What you should put it more is that have we as South Africans in their diaspora and in the business side of things, that the president have gained more confidence and investors gaining more confidence to invest in South Africa. This is what it's all about. It's not about the president. Because if you merely putting it about the president, I think you will be doing a damage to what he is doing or trying to do as the newly president of South Africa. This what is all about, is to clean up and bring confidence to South Africa. This is what it's all about.
Oliver Dickson, when we've discussed this before, when there was the finance minister merry-go-round, especially under former President Zuma, we spoke about the markets reacting negatively. We spoke about negative or lack of confidence from the outside. Even though you believe this was just the normal or the necessary thing to do, as we're hearing from someone like Xolani, outsiders are saying this is good. We are encouraged by this. Are you encouraged by that?
I'm largely indifferent. I think it would be naive to assume that Tito Mboweni is going to step in and redirect the ship into an entirely different direction, even though he is a socialist. Some call him a Marxist, even though he believes in the nationalization of mines, at least a partial nationalization thereof. He believes in establishment of a sovereign wealth fund, and he believes that South Africa should nationalize the land. Those are all political ideals he holds about our political economy, but it's unlikely that he will steer the ship in that direction. He's going to toe the line that was already established by Malusi Gigaba out in February, that Nene then took over, and he's going to continue that till past the elections, because it would be an unfavorable thing for them to steer the ship in a different direction at this point in time entirely. So whether it's Nene or Tito Mboweni, it doesn't really matter. I think I think Tito Mboweni was the right decision insofar as you care about the aesthetics of the position of finance minister. He's a man of gravitas. He's been in the finance cluster before. The markets clearly love him. So he's the right person to have there as a figurehead of our finance cluster.
Ferial, there was talk of the state being captured. That was the massive anxiety in the nation and the fear under the Guptas. The Guptas' influence over the president and others meant that the state was captured. Is the state now uncaptured?
Not at all. I think we're a far way away from that. But what does give me hope as a South African is that there is political and civil society goodwill to begin that process of uncapturing, to exercise at least an understanding or the truth of what happened to us, to try and ensure that it won't happen again. So I think it's the beginning of something. I think it's going to take us a good 10 years. You know, the former finance minister, Pravin Gordhan, always puts a figure of 100 billion rand on what was stolen from us. And I think it's going to take at least 5 to 10 years to even begin to make that up and put it into the good work of development.
Right. Xolani, what will be closure for South Africans? At what point will South Africans say, hey, we are uncaptured, or there's been a semblance of justice, if you like? I understand that the Guptas are in Dubai. Would it be an extradition, or would it be former President Zuma actually going to jail for all of this, where South Africans can finally draw a line and say, okay, we're moving forward? What's going to be that point?
I think let's start first to acknowledge what have happened here. You may be aware that South Africa have had a numerous number of commission inquiries. Nothing have happened before. Nobody have been arrested. Nobody have been put into prison, or they pay a certain amount of money. We have heard that last time when the former President Zuma was asked to pay a certain amount of money, but nothing happened really in terms of leaving office. For the first time in South Africa, we see such a thing happening where a sitting finance minister, the highest ministerial position in South Africa, steps down. We must congratulate this and see it as a positive sign to bring back South Africa as we celebrate the year of Nelson Mandela, to bring back the vibe of the late Nelson Nhlanhla Mandela.
Oliver Dickson, what will it take you to jump out of your indifference and skepticism and believe that the state has been uncaptured?
Firstly, I think if the scope of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry could be broadened a little bit to beyond just the Guptas. At the moment, just the Guptas are being investigated, and for good reason. They did do a number of nefarious things. But I think other than the Guptas, there are a number of other people doing nefarious things. If you would have noticed the furore in the country just yesterday, when it was described to us just how brazenly a bank was heisted over a number of years, using political power, using a political proximity to political power to be able to do that. So it means that beyond just the Guptas, there's a program of looting that's continuing that yields around different political axes, and I think that's what needs to happen for that to be rooted out. I think importantly there needs to be a broader investigation into it. But I think not just an investigation, I think action needs to be taken, and I think that action comes in the form of criminal prosecution.
Oliver, who's doing the looting?
As we would have seen just yesterday, the EFF treasurer in Limpopo, which is our northern province in this country, looted money out of a bank, more than 25 million. And that's something that needs to be investigated. So there's an example over there. If we've seen other cases where in exactly the same instance, money was looted by a fellow closely connected to the second biggest opposition in the party, the EFF. So that too is an instance that worries me. That shows that looting is not just the thing that the Guptas brought. They may have exacerbated it, but looting and corruption exists beyond just that family.
Ferial, is everybody still stealing?
You know, McKinsey stealing, Bain stealing, KPMG yesterday again shown to not exercise its due standards, multinationals, every level of government. I think what we do have is the truth coming out, and I hope that from truth will come justice, and that the looting will end, because ours, as you know, is a country with huge poverty and unemployment problems.
Right. Interesting. So, Xolani, if I knew nothing about South Africa, I happen to be a South African here chairing this discussion, but if I knew nothing about the country and I met you in London and I asked you about the state of the economy and the state of the nation and its politics, would you be optimistic or pessimistic?
Oh, very much. Look, what is happening currently, it's exciting for business people to come and invest in South Africa. Let's look at this. It's just only 8 months this current president is in office, and he have managed to raise billions so far, and he has a target to raise 100 billions. Just in a couple of days to come now, I think about 3 weeks, is having an investment conference in Johannesburg. So it's exciting that at least there is a president who talks about creating jobs and investment, is excited to go back and invest in South Africa. There's a lot of things happening that excite South Africans abroad. They're able to vote internationally. We're going to 2019 elections. Nothing so far we have heard about. So there's a lot to talk about South Africa. Unlike if I will talk to you about United Kingdom, Brexit, nobody knows what's happening. Nobody knows what will be happening next year. So uncertainty here in United Kingdom, it's something else in South Africa. As South Africans were grateful. We like this current president because when he came on in office in February, he said he will root up corruption. He will make sure that jobs are created. And I think if we give him enough time, he's acting. Let's be a little bit patient.
Ferial, very finally, I want to circle back to Tito Mboweni.
Yes.
Is he the right man for the job, and what can we expect?
I think he's the right person for the job right now because he could step right into it. He wouldn't be a learner, and we did need somebody almost immediately. Tomorrow, Moody's, the ratings agency, makes a crucial decision for us, and because so much of our debt is held outside the country, that's a vital moment to watch. I think Tito Mboweni could immediately deal with that. In 2 weeks' time, he's got a midterm budget statement to make. I think he has the skill and dexterity to do that. He's well known globally and locally, and I think his economic ideas have been finely tuned over 20 years in public and political service. So I think he's the right person for the job right now.
Okay, Ferial, Haffajee, Oliver Dickson and Xolani, Xala, it's been a pleasure having all of you on the Newsmakers. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.